US and British leaders meet as Ukraine pushes to ease weapons restrictions. Washington. United States President Joe Biden and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer are meeting Friday amid an intensified push by Ukraine to loosen restrictions on using weapons provided by the US and Britain to strike Russia. The talks come amid signs that the White House could be moving toward a shift in its policy, and as Russia's President Vladimir Putin warned that Ukraine's use of long-range weapons would put NATO at war with Moscow. Ukrainian officials renewed their pleas to use Western-provided long-range missiles against targets deeper inside Russia during this week's visit to Kiev by US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy. Blinken said he had no doubt that Biden and Starmer would discuss the matter during their visit, nothing the US has adopted and will adjust the necessary, as Russia's battlefield strategy has changed. The language is similar to what Blinken said in May, shortly before the US allowed Ukraine to use American-provided weapons charged inside Russian territory. The distance has been largely limited to cross-border targets deemed a direct threat out of concerns about further escalating the conflict. While the issue is expected to be at the top of the leaders' agenda, it appeared unlikely that Biden and Starmer would announce any policy changes during this week's visit, according to two US officials familiar with planning for the leaders' talk who spoke on condition of anonymity because they weren't authorized to discuss the private deliberations. In addition to Blinken, Biden also has hinted a change could be afoot. In an exchange with reporters earlier this week about whether he is ready to ease weapons restrictions on Ukraine, he responded, "We are working that, not now." Putin warned Thursday that allowing long-range strikes would mean that NATO countries, the United States, and European countries are at war with Russia. If this is so, then bearing in mind the change in the very essence of this conflict, we will make appropriate decisions based on the threats that will be created for us. His remarks were in line with the narrative the Kremlin has actively promoted since early in the Ukraine war, accusing NATO countries of de facto participation in the conflict and threatening response. Earlier in the year, Putin warned that Russia could provide long-range weapons to others to strike Western targets in response to NATO allies allowing Ukraine to use their arms to attack Russian territory, saying it would mark their direct involvement in the war against the Russian Federation, and we reserve the right to act the same way. Starmer, in response to the Russian leader's Thursday comments, said on his way to the US that Britain does not seek any conflict with Russia. Russia started this conflict. Russia illegally invaded Ukraine. Russia could end this conflict straight away. Starmer told reporters, "Ukraine has the right to self-defense and we have obviously been absolutely fully supportive of Ukraine's right to self-defense. We are providing training capability as you know, but we don't seek any conflict with Russia. That's not our intention in the slightest," Starmer said. Ukraine President Vladimir Zelensky has pressed US and allied military leaders to go much further. He argues that the US must allow Ukraine to target Russian air bases and launch sites far from the border as Russia has stepped up asserts on Ukraine's electricity grid and utilities ahead of the coming winter. Zelensky also wants more long-range weaponry from the United States, including the Army Tactical Missile System, known as ATACMS for strikes in Russia. ATACMS could be the answer to the main threat Ukraine faces from long-range Russian glide bombs, which are being fired from more than 300 kilometers away. Beyond the ATACMS trees, said limited coil-style detached Pentagon spokesman. American officials also don't believe that they have enough of the weapon system available to provide Ukraine with the number to make a substantive defense to conditions on the ground. One of the US officials said during a meeting of allied defense ministers last week. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said that he did not believe providing Ukraine with long-range weapon systems would be a game changer in the grueling war. He noted that Ukraine has already been able to strike inside Russia with its own internally produced system, including drones. I don't believe on capability is young to be deceived and I stand by that comment, Austin said. As of right now, the policy has not changed. Maz Jenpat Ryder, Pentagon press secretary, said Thursday. Starmer said he was visiting Washington for strategic meetings to discuss Ukraine and to discuss the Middle East. It's the Prime Minister's second meeting with Biden since his center-left government was elected in July. It comes after Britain last week divorced from the US by suspending some arms exports to Israel because of the risk they could be used to break international law. Both countries have downplayed their difference over the issue. Biden and Starmer's meeting also comes ahead of his month's annual meeting of global leaders at the United Nations General Assembly. The Oval Office meeting was scheduled in part to help the two leaders compare notes on the war in Ukraine, languishing efforts to get a ceasefire deal in Gaza and the other issue ahead of the UN meeting. The White House also has sought in recent days to put a greater emphasis on the nexus between the war in Ukraine and conflict in the Middle East, sparked after Iranian-backed Hamas militants in Gaza launched attacks on Israel on October 7. The Biden administration said this week that Iran recently delivered short-range ballistic weapons to Russia to use against Ukraine, a transfer that White House officials worry will allow Russia to use more of its arsenal for targets far beyond the Ukrainian front line while employing Iranian warheads for closer-range targets. In turn, the US administration says Russia has been tightening its relationship with Iran, including by providing it with nuclear and space technology. This is obviously deeply concerning, White House National Secretary spokesperson John Kirby said of the missile transfer, and it certainly speaks to the manner in which this partnership threatens European security and how it illustrates Iran's destabilizing influence now reaches well beyond the Middle East.